Hi everyone, my name is Alcides Fuentes, and this is my senior exit project for my Latin American and Latino Studies major. Some information about myself: I am a first-generation transfer student of color who transferred from Diablo Valley College in the Bay Area. I was born in El Salvador and immigrated to the United States with my family when I was about 8 years old. I grew up in the Bay Area and became interested in political science, climate change, and digital media communication during my time in community college. I decided to transfer to UC Santa Cruz in 2020 to finish my double major in Global Environmental Justice and Latin American and Latino Studies. This year, I became interested in the Study Abroad Agroecology Practicum course in Guatemala, taught by Damien Parr. I decided to create this video in order to test my skills in video production and because I am interested in pursuing a career in digital media, video production, or communications, while also bringing together my interest of climate justice and Latin American history and culture. One of the reasons why I decided to take on this project was because I wasn't able to take a video production class during my time in college, where I would learn the skills of video editing and production. Therefore, I produced this video having very minimal video editing experience, essentially only using my intuition and tools such as YouTube tutorials. For the methods of this project, I recorded my experiences, interviewed people who taught us about agroecology, and finally put together a video that would serve as my LALS senior exit project. The following is a retelling of our study abroad journey and the experiences and knowledge that we learned while we were there. I hope you enjoy. Our first stop in Guatemala was Caoba Farms, a sustainable farm led by a man named Alex Kronik, nestled in the popular tourist town of Antigua, Guatemala. At this farm, we took a tour of the space while learning about the sustainable farming methods that Alex and his team practice at Caoba Farms. There, we learned the history of over 40 years of community development centering on indigenous land care and food sovereignty, taught by an indigenous man named Cruz Cuncun. Cruz Cuncun told us the story of his involvement in the campesino a campesino movement as an extensionista, a person who travels to different places teaching rural communities the ways of agroecology and how to sustain themselves with the land. Cruz Cuncun shared with us his experiences of growing up in poverty and how agroecology and the people around him helped him overcome hardships throughout his life. He told us about his experiences during the huge earthquake that struck Guatemala in the 80s and his unfortunate experiences fleeing from the civil war that took place around the same time.
Hubo un terremoto, nos bajó a todos.
There was a huge earthquake and it took down all the buildings.
Se quedó todo San Martín, el municipio se murieron 5,000 gente.
All of the buildings in San Martin fell down and 5,000 people in that county died.
As our time with Cruz Cuncun came to a close, he left us with the 10 commandments of an extensionista, a list of things that he lived by when working alongside rural communities. These commandments helped him become a successful teacher, farmer, and community member. They pertain to relationships among ourselves, the people around us, and the natural world. Meeting Cruz Cuncun was an awesome experience, and we all took away something important from our time together. Our next stop near Antigua was Volcán Acatenango, a volcano 13,000 feet above sea level and adjacent to the Volcán de Fuego, one of the most constantly active volcanoes in Guatemala. We hiked a small part of the volcano to meet up with our friend Jaime, an indigenous man who introduced us to his land and taught us how to plant corn, fava beans, and peas.
Sencillo y práctico. Y uno por esquina. Y luego es poca la tierra, es muy poca. No es nomás esto. Porque si haces esto, mucha lluvia, lo sumerge y ya también nos sale. ¿Viene? ¿Viene? ¿Tienes? Uno. Entonces vengo y sigo. Uno.
want to put them closer,
Ya
but
estamos listos.
for the winter it's a little bit more complicated for the rain.
Y ya, perdón, este otro acá. Acá. Sí tienes que tomar fuerza. Entonces, aquí no hay problema.
We each took turns planting seeds and learning the techniques that we had been taught. We learned a lot from him about his farming methods, as well as the history that he and his family had on their land. At the end of the day, after our long hike, we shared a meal with him and his family and got ready to travel to our next destination, El Mirador Farm. El Mirador Farm is an indigenous, family-led farm in the town of San Martín y Lotepeque, a place about 2 to 3 hours away from Antigua. At this farm, we meet Moisés, Brígida, and the rest of the families in El Mirador. We stay in the homes of local people living in the town of San Martín and travel about 15 minutes every day by bus to the farm where Moisés and Brígida tell us the stories of their land and of the Movimiento Campesino a Campesino, in which Moisés's late father, Manuel, was a leading figure. On the first day we arrived, we were treated to a delicious homegrown meal after a long drive from Antigua. Brígida and Moisés began telling us their family's history and how they came to own the land on which we were on. She told us how she had met her husband, as well as what had motivated Manuel to become an extensionista. She showed us around the property and mentioned that the soil was red hard clay when they first moved in, but through the help of Manuel's agricultural knowledge and community support, they were able to rejuvenate the land into what it is today. Then, she told us how their hard work had been uprooted when the huge earthquake occurred, as well as their hardships in keeping and taking care of their land when the Civil War erupted in Guatemala and Manuel and Brígida were forced to separate and flee from their land to Mexico and later Honduras. At the end of our stay, Moisés and Brígida recounted their experiences and challenges of returning to El Mirador after the war and continuing to live off their land ever since.
Pues nosotros familias aquí, pues mi trabajo también es criar animales, gallinas, cerdos. Desde que pasamos a vivir aquí nos sentimos mucha tierra. Y desde ese entonces tuvimos una vaca. Entonces a nosotros no vamos al pueblo a traer carne, a traer huevo, cosechamos en alrededor de la casa, porque cuando yo vine a vivir aquí, yo soy el único. Y pues no hay cerco, no hay nada, no hay camino, todo es solito. Yo solo riego los pollos y caminan, escarban y nixtamal, masa, hierba. Pues ahí nos dan huevo. Si quiero carne, solo estiro una gallina y tengo la comida. Si no, pues voy a cortar quilete, chipilín a la comida. Entonces no gastamos mucho dinero, no somos consumistas, porque aquí mismo hay. Entonces ahora hay un cambio, porque como tuvimos 2, 3 etapas, cuando estamos aquí felices, la casita, llueve, se moja uno, no importa, pero ya después hicimos nuestra casa, el 76, viene el terremoto, botó la casa, toda la cosecha, maíz, frijol, se revolvió con la tierra.
The next day, we were given a tour of the entire farm and continued learning about the agricultural methods that the families that built El Mirador used in order to restore the soil health throughout the farm. We also learned about the founding of a cooperative that helped the farmers establish better prices for the food they were producing. Afterwards, we traveled into town where we completed our rapid food systems assessment, an assignment that had us talking to people at the local farmers market in San Martín y Lotepeque about where they got their produce. On the third day, we suited up to do some gardening. However, we first gathered together under the trees where Brigida explained to us that this spot had been designated as the most sacred place in El Mirador. This was the spot where they came to pray, give offerings, and request their needs, such as good health for their children. Then we were off to do some work, clearing away banana trees and planting avocado and citrus trees.
So I think we're missing one hole, right?
Is it back there?
¿Y qué es mejor, usar las manos o usar como
Have the soil level right here.
After that, we walked up to Granja El Triunfo, where we meet Juanita Uz and her family. Juanita introduces us to her family's farm, which used cows as the main source for a variety of processes in their farm.
Llamado Granja El Triunfo.
This farm that you're going to see today is called the Triumph, the Farm of Triumph.
Tenemos nuestras vacas lecheras, que ese es lo más importante que tenemos acá, porque de allí sacamos la materia orgánica. El estiércol, la orina, lo estamos utilizando en el pasto, en la milpa, en la zacatera, árboles frutales y todo lo que vemos acá.
So they call it estiércol. So that's cow poop and it's mixed with water. And they use it in everything. They use it in their zacate, which is that big plant, the C4 plant that they use to cut for the cows, in the milpa, which we know in all of the gardens, vegetable gardens. It's kind of the base of the nutrient cycle of the farm.
Ahora nosotros al estiércol le llamamos oro negro.
Oh, they call estiércol black gold.
We get a tour of Granja El Triunfo, where Juanita and her family show us how they work with cows to produce and maintain many aspects of their farm. We even get a glimpse into their process of cheese making. There, they use the milk from the cow for the cheese, as well as a specific organ, which salts the cheese and gives it an amazing flavor. On our last day, our trip guide Luis gives us a demonstration of a spiritual Maya ceremony. We learn about the ways in which Maya culture operates and what their belief system is like. Luis tells us about the importance of the 4 directions, as well as what each of the candle colors represent. Then we moved on to visit an orphanage where Moises works with children, teaching them the ways of agroecology so that they may grow up with the skills and knowledge necessary to understand how to grow their own food. And that was how we spent our time at Granja El Mirador. We learned a lot about the families living there and how they used their land to provide for themselves and their community. Now it was time to move on to our next and final destination, El Instituto Mesoamericano de Permacultura, also known as IMAP. IMAP is a place located in San Lucas, Toliman, a town nestled in the beautiful and majestic lake of Lago Atitlan. We stay at IMAP for 4 days, during which we learn about the various sustainable agricultural practices and methods that are taught there, and how they relate to topics such as food sovereignty and social justice. When we arrive, we are given a tour of IMAP. They show us how they use composting toilets.
Entonces, si nos damos cuenta, pues no solo se evita el problema, ¿verdad?, del uso del agua y la contaminación, sino que también todavía aprovechamos este recurso.
Yeah, so we avoid using the water and pollution, but also we get this compost.
And seed banks.
Semillas que están en diferentes contenedores.
So this is the seed bank. We have different containers.
Entonces las semillas que tenemos acá pues son semillas nativas y criollas.
So we have native ones and criollas.
Lastly, we end the day by walking to the lakeshore and taking a swim. On the second day, we observe a deeper Maya spiritual ritual. We learn about the Mayan calendar and its relation to ourselves and agriculture as well. Then, we get together to learn about the politics and importance of food sovereignty and what the connections are between the United States and Latin America, as well as capitalism and extractivism. After that, we have a cooking class where we learn to cook with cacao and amaranth, as well as the traditional methods for preparing certain recipes.
Con el caramelo.
So we're just mixing the caramel with the syrup.
On the third day, we wake up early to go on a hike in a forest. There, we learn more about the ways of thinking of the Maya people, and after that, we visit an edible forest, where we learn the contrast between regular wild forests and the possibilities that humans have for creating things like edible forests. After that, we traveled across the lake by boat to San Juan La Laguna, where we visit a shop to learn about the ways in which Maya people weave and dye their textiles. On the fourth and final day, we traveled to a sustainable fishery, where we learn about methods for farming watercress, fish, as well as medicinal honey. Overall, we enjoyed spending time amongst the beautiful scenery of IMAP, Lago Atitlan, and its surrounding places, as well as the amazing people who dedicate their lives to living sustainably in connection with the earth and their ancestral past. Finally, we returned to Caoba Farms in Antigua for our final dinner. The next day, many of us travel back to the United States, while others stay for an extended summer vacation. But all in all, our trip concludes here. During my time in Guatemala, I learned about the importance of food systems, eating locally, and knowing where your food comes from. I learned about the ways in which growing healthy, sustainable food and teaching people how to do the same can improve a community's well-being, spiritual satisfaction, economic prosperity, and many other aspects of their lives. I learned about the rich connections between indigenous people, their lands, the things they grow and eat, and their perspectives on how they live their lives. I also got to exercise my translation and planning skills, oftentimes helping to plan out the day's activities or translating the topics that we were learning about, from Spanish to English, or even the other way around. I got to practice my interviewing skills as well as video journalism, and while I wasn't able to capture every single thing, this trip and this assignment have become an amazing learning experience for me. As a transfer student of color, double majoring in global environmental justice and Latin American and Latino studies, I learned about the possibilities that exist for traveling and possibly working abroad in similar social or environmental justice related fields. I made lifelong friends and connections, and I am excited to apply these new perspectives and skills to the world and my life going forward. I hope you enjoyed watching my LALS senior exit video. Thanks.